distance allows for objectivity, right? When you're too
Yeah.
close to something, you really can't see things that aren't right. It's same with like, you can read a sentence 10 times and be like, it reads fine. What's the problem? Somebody else reads it and is like, you missed a word. It's like, but my
Yeah.
brain filled it in. Same with this, right? Like somebody else could look and say, well, this doesn't make sense, or what about this? Or have you thought about that? Whereas because you're so close to it, you've already filled that gap in. So moving away from it and coming back gives you the ability to find those little holes that you might have missed otherwise.
I'm going to actually show you the first six so we can refresh. We have the six thumbnails laid out like this so I can get a really good sense of how it's going to flow throughout the story. Page one and page six actually kind of mirror each other.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that as I was going, as we were working through this, I realized that if I were to approach the the pages, I would maybe want to see if there's other opportunities because while it wasn't necessarily present in the script, some of these opportunities kind of come about when you're on the spot. And one of the things we had mentioned prior was this is really unique because Sarah is watching me create these, and I've never had that opportunity before. So
Mhm.
what I want to do is I actually want to go back to page one. Now that I kind of have that mindset, now that I have that, oh, this is not just me. This is two people doing this. So let's see what it looks like if I were to revisit page one, but maybe look at a different approach to it. So this was an idea that I actually was given on Facebook. Somebody was actually asking to share thumbnails to see how people approached it. And they had mentioned they liked the way I did thumbnails. And one of the things they did as a additive was they would actually see they would take a different version of page one and put it like right below. So I'm
Mhm.
going to do the same thing for this one. I want to see, and I'll zoom in a little bit here. Here we go. So I think that I like the idea of we're looking down to explore the room on page or panel one, and then it's kind of like a slow burn. The person is noticing the door in panel two. Panel three, they're approaching the door, figuring out that it's not supposed to be there and it's locked. And then panel four, they're talking to the landlord, and the landlord is like, "What are you talking about?" That's what we see in panel five. And then panel six, it's kind of like the door is becoming a little bit more of a thing with this person, right? We're leaving it a bit on a cliffhanger here, right? So I don't know if you wanted to go over the script a little bit on page one just to refresh.
I think it's actually a really interesting idea to go ahead and look at it from a different angle like that. Like, how else, especially now that we've worked our way completely through the story. Whereas initially, because we were sort of still figuring it out, now we've figured out where we're ending, and now we can go back to sort of the beginning and sort of see where we would take it, which I think is a really cool idea.
One of the earlier episodes, I had done this kind of like a warped 3D version of it. I hadn't really wasn't sure where the light was coming from, and I wasn't sure where things were located, so I wasn't able to really quite
Hmm.
have a very good visual in my head. But now that I do, I can actually, I think, approach this in a much easier way. So I'm going to do similar layout of the room, but it's going to be more of like we're looking overhead. It's like instead of it being more of an architectural type of layout, this is more of like you're playing some kind of god and looking like over the roof doesn't exist here, right? And
Yeah.
so we know that there's a light that comes in here, but I also just kind of figured out like the person opens the door and there's like, what if the shadow of that person actually lands right on the door there, right? So,
Ooh, that's cool. I like that.
yeah, like that's another possibility. And then, of course, we're going to have like other doors are going to be open here. So we know that there's not really like, like that there is actually everything is available to that person except that door.
So I have the script in front of me, so I will go through what we had put as page one. So we had that the first panel, boxes in a mostly bare apartment, neutral daytime light from a window, minimal furniture, a small TV on the floor or a low stand, scattered books, and a bookshelf. The extra door is present, but not spotlit yet. And then you'd made notes about this being the establishing shot of the room and some of the different things that you had commented on, seeing the whole space, all those kinds of things. In the second panel, we talked about Sam is mid task carrying a box and their eyes catch the extra door. Huh. Then we move into Sam crossing, hand on the knob, and it doesn't budge, noticing that it's locked. And Sam says, locked. And then panel four, Sam at a small counter near the entry using a landline corded phone. Again, establishing the time. The door sits in the background. Sam tries to sound normal. Hi, quick question. There's a locked door in my unit. I don't have a key. And then we hear the landlord, or we see the landlord off camera. What door? Panel five, Sam freezes and the normalcy drains out. The door is still behind them and it's still. And Sam says, no, never mind. And then the final panel, Sam turns back to the boxes in the foreground. We frame the door slightly more present than before. So that was sort of our flow of the first page. And it's actually probably the page with the most dialogue out of all of them, because Sam is sort of still reaching to the outside world at this point and goes more inward as we move through the pages.
So I'm trying to approach this now with like, can I try different angles? Can I try different like with panel
Mhm.
two, where we are almost looking a bit down? Maybe we're actually in this panel, we're going to be looking slightly upwards through the arm of Sam. So that see if I can trying to figure out a way to frame the door so that it's like you can kind of see it through their arm, and I'm having a little bit of a little difficulty, but I I just want to keep on repeating this. The
Mhm.
beauty of thumbnails are that when you're doing it this small and you are trying to figure something out, like you can very quickly, easily just erase, or if you're working traditionally, just use like some kind of like a paper that's very, very thin, like a transparent type or translucent type paper. So you could always like flip it, like draw something on top and be like, oh, that doesn't work, and remove it and take another piece and do the same thing. Like there are ways to do it traditionally. Or you just take like typing paper, something that doesn't cost you a lot of money, and just I used to print out what you're seeing here on my screen. I used to print those out and just very quickly try different things in such a small size that it usually happens pretty quickly, right? So I'm trying to I have something in my head, and when it comes to like the way this is supposed to block in panel 2, and I'm not quite getting it because I want to be able to see the door somehow, and it's one of those things where it's like, how do I get that so we can see the door? Um, and it just may not work exactly. So I'm gonna let that go for now. Um, I'll just keep this. I kind of have an idea. We know there's going to be a HUD there. We know that it's just essentially the door somewhere in there, but I'm not sure like exactly where Sam's going to be uh, locking the path to the door somehow. So I'll just leave that for now. And then panel 3. So we have when we're dealing with time, when somebody's doing something, and we have um, the ability to like, do we choose the moments where the door is about to be opened? Do we do this so that we can see them walking across, or are they at the door already? And I think, you know, I'm going to go with like maybe a bit of a similar view.
Already with seeing what you've done, it's completely changed the feel of the first page, right? Like just the look, that different first panel has totally changed the feeling of how we enter the story. And whether one's better or not, I'm not sure, but just in the moment, it gives a completely different feeling, which is really interesting.
And that's it. Here's the thing. After I've done this and you look at it and you go, you made a good point. You're like, it changes the feeling of this. And
Mhm.
so you may decide that it feels better um, to go with the first one we did. Um, but on the other hand, there may be, what if there's some panels in this one that you're like, ooh, that one works a bit better. And
Mhm.
then we can
Mix and match.
Frankenstein something, right? And
Absolutely.
that's kind of the point of this is like there may not be a better full thumbnail, but we may take parts of it.
Absolutely, and the comment was it feels different. And like I said, I'm not sure which I prefer. I noticed the energy is already different from one to the other. And I think part of it too is going to be like which one gives that initial creepy vibe the best, right? Like which one
Yeah.
sets in the right tone for the story. And then how we move through the story, like you said, we might pick sections from both. So I think having options is actually a really interesting way to do it because we've done everything else by trying it many different times. So it makes sense to do that here too.
Yeah. So now I'm going back. Sometimes picture this as like a puzzle and you're trying to put in pieces and you're not putting them in a linear way. It's a linear way of doing this, right? And or non-linear way. And so what I'm figuring out as I've figured out like, oh, maybe panel 3 is an open panel of some sort, and it almost you can even have the character bleeding into panel 2, which leads your eye into panel 3, because there's really not a lot of dialogue
Hmm.
in panel 2, so I could easily just, so we've got the "huh" here, right? So we've got the boxes that are being carried, and there's like the door there, right? So we're not even seeing Sam so much in this one. Maybe is that purposeful? I'm not sure. Like I don't know if seeing Sam clearly. Do we want to see Sam a little bit more clearly? And that would answer some of the questions of maybe we using more of page one. Um,
There's something about that middle panel, that third panel, that gives a really interesting kinetic energy, right? Like if you look
mhm,
at the first option, it's very still, it's very distant, it's very kind of voyeuristic. Whereas the second option, there's much more action, right? Like it's like there's an energy in those panels, and you really feel like that frenetic, like setting up my day. I'm going to go open this door and see what's behind it, and then slam, doesn't work, right? Yeah, and so
yeah,
it's the suspense is different, which again, just from changing those few things, it does change the feel. Absolutely.
yeah, and like as I said earlier, having you here makes it gives me like right away kind of reaction that I
Mhm.
wouldn't have otherwise because I may look at it and go, "This is the greatest thing ever," and then your response to it is like, "Oh, you're going with that?" Right?
I
Or
would
it
never
changes the
say that
tone of
to
it. Yeah, right? You're like, "Oh, well, that's an interesting way of approaching it. I don't know." And so but, like, that's kind of the what I'm trying to get approach
Yeah.
here is that, uh, I'm disconnecting myself a little bit from it, and I just want to get your reaction because
Mhm.
you're getting an immediate visceral reaction to what I'm doing. You're not in my head,
Yeah.
but you can see what I'm doing, and therefore, um, you give me like an immediate kind of like it's almost like a yay or nay, or it could be used, but maybe uh, maybe not quite. Um, like
Yeah.
maybe not in the same way. Like these are all things that like I've never really had before, so it's cool.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny because you're looking at it from the actual purpose of the scene and how you're composing it, and I'm having a completely emotional reaction to it, right? So in your mind, how you're doing things, like you're thinking it through from that story, and I'm just looking at it for how am I feeling when I see this. And because those two different perspectives are important, right? Because they both have to work together. They have to make sense, they have to tell the story properly, and they have to give you the right emotion for the scene. And that's where it's like feeling different energies between the first and the second option. The first one feels very voyeuristic, slow, creepy. And the second
Hmm.
one feels very frenetic, kinetic, moving around my space, right? And I'm
Yeah.
not sure which is better than the other, but they do feel immediately different.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this. Are there any panels that you would want to, like, as I said, mix and match? Do you think there's something that you would, let's say, what's your instinct? Do you feel like the first one I did is working better for the tone of the story? But are there any kinds of like panels that you would want to grab from the second one? Or do you like the second one and think it kind of changed the pace in a way that you want to approach, see how
Mhm.
how it influences like uh, the second page,
I
you know?
think and overall, my feeling is that the first option is better from the horror point of view because it is a little creepier. That being
Mhm.
said, I do really like the, third panel with it kind of, being an open panel and that energy of moving across the space, that kind of
Mhm.
kinetic, that one leg into the previous panel. I do really like that. And we sort of started leaning towards it as we got further into the story of, like, kind of breaking frame in some different ways, and I like the way that that's working to kind of take it, like, so that Sam is immediately being like, "Solving my own problem," like, is almost like, "No worries, I've got this," and then things crash down really quickly. So that's kind of
It's
my immediate feeling from seeing the 2 options.
so maybe there's a solution because like I feel that to your point, there's a much more frenetic kind of energy with the second one. Let's
Mhm,
call it B. We've got one B, and then there's one C here now, one A, one B, one C. So one B, I agree with what you're saying, and I kind of feel like the original one is the one I'm gravitating towards. But
mhm,
maybe what you're saying in regards to the movement of um, it doesn't mean that we can't like make it so that, let's say, Sam's kind of approaching door a little bit more, with a little bit more urgency than
mhm.
this one here. So maybe there is that, like the walk is like almost, it's not quite a run, but it's for sure. They're like, what the heck is, and they
Yeah,
just,
exactly, and I think that that adds just that little something to that first page, but I agree that the first option that we did just felt a bit more creepy and horror in tone, um, but that motion of, like, the urgency to the dead stop, I think is really interesting, right? Like, it's like
mhm.
that, like, "No problem, I'm dealing with this, stop." And then everything stops in the tracks, and then nothing is the same after that moment. So it's kind of an important moment in the story to really kick off the horror, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's something even like when I'm looking at,
Mhm.
panel 2 in the original one. I just like the way it like the with the shadow and stuff.
Yeah.
I just like that, I think, a little bit more. I do like the idea of, there is a light coming through, so it could be that we are gonna see a bit of that light from the person, um, maybe even like a dual light kinda thing coming through.
Mhm.
Um, but, like, I guess it just really all it is just verifying, like, what was working in the original one and some of the things that aren't quite working in the second version, but maybe there's some ideas that we can grab from it. And hypothetically, we can keep on doing this. Like, there's nothing to say that I couldn't do a D, E, F, G, but it just,
Mhm.
at some point you want to be able to, um, actually, if anything, because I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that last panel there, and I don't mind this one here, so I'm going to
Mhm. It's interesting
this
too.
here.
This exercise even shows how any people interpret things so differently, right? So you can
Hmm.
interpret those few the words on the page can lead to so many variations on things, and that's why it can be hard to comment on or judge other people's art, right? Because their interpretation of something isn't necessarily the same as yours, and it doesn't mean either one is right. So it's an interesting exercise to kind of reinterpret it again to see how you feel and if your first instincts were right or if now you've changed your mind based on a new interpretation, right? Thank you so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Thank you.